How do weigh stations work for truck drivers? In order for us to understand this a little bit better, I want to go over what weigh stations are and what to expect, especially as a truck driver myself, knowing what I have seen out there as far as weigh stations. There were two incidents that I personally had, so stay with me through the video for these few minutes as I will share my experiences with you. If you're an experienced truck driver, this is going to relate to you as well. If you're new to the trucking industry or thinking about getting into trucking, this could be some helpful information for you. Weigh stations are, of course, operated by DOT, the Department of Transportation, and their primary goal is to make sure that truck drivers are being legal on the road, making sure that their axles are not overweight. And as truck drivers, we know those limits of when we are possibly overweight and we have to go through a weigh station, a CAT scale as they would call it, or other CAT scales or other scales that we go through from independent truck stops that have a certified scale. This enables us to make sure that each axle is under the legal limit. So you have different types of weigh stations. You may have heard of weigh in motion, and this is where the technology is able to sense the weight of the tractor and trailer in motion. And of course, if it triggers something in the system, you will get a red light, of course, and you will have to pull in. Another method that these weigh stations use are when you get closer to the weigh station, you will see a posted speed limit of 5 or 10 miles per hour, depending on where you're at in the States. And it has a spot where you can stop. And then you have instructions in front of you, whether that is a green light or a red light. Sometimes it will say proceed to inspection. That's bad news for some truck drivers that are not keeping up with logs and just not obeying the limits on the axles. And truck drivers that are experienced know what I'm talking about. And we as truck drivers never want to really waste a lot of time on a weigh station or at a weigh station because we're trying to get to our destination. But this is just the nature of the job. As truck drivers, we have to follow these DOT rules to make sure that we are legal on the road. So the two types, once again, weigh in motion, and the second type is where you actually pull up to the weigh station, and some, depending, will just take the total weight to see whether you are under the 80,000 pound limit, or some that are a little bit more strict will tell you to stop at every axle, and sometimes that could be trouble if you're just off a little bit. So here's an incident that I ran into one time, and it was a very heavy load. Sometimes as truck drivers, we do take advantage that it is not over the limit, but in this case, I had a heavy load and it was over on one of the axles because of how they loaded it. So even if I did weigh, I would have never balanced out because they loaded the merchandise or the product improperly. Instead of just taking the time to make sure that I was properly under the limit, I took advantage of that. You know, this was a learning lesson that I experienced as a truck driver. And when I got to this port of entry, I was over and I had to waste, hours calling my company, also calling a third party to come out and rework the load. And this is when I was a more inexperienced driver. And of course, now I understand that it's just better to weigh the load. Even if they didn't load it properly, it's always best to go back to the shipper and have them rework it. No matter how rushed you feel, no matter if you're gonna lose the miles, maybe you can work that out with your company, that they can compensate you for that lost time. But the best practice is always weigh your load, because that could have cost me a huge ticket. Fortunately, in that incident, I did not get a ticket. It was just reworked because that was primarily on the shipper as well for not loading it properly. A second incident that I experienced as a truck driver, I did not pull off to a weigh station, and there was a sign before, but I didn't recognize any weigh station to my right. This was in Oklahoma, and I took it for granted. I kept going, And sure enough, there was a highway patrol there waiting for me in the front of where you were supposed to exit. And they were pulling someone else over, or in the very process of giving that person a ticket in front of me. And as I approached, they did that little wave to the side. And once they did that, I knew that it was not good news. So that's another lesson that I learned. Even if you don't see the weigh station, be more diligent, look out for these weigh stations, because they will give you a ticket. And in this second incident, I did get a ticket, but fortunately, it was a $150 fine. But fortunately, it did not go against my driver's license, commercial driver's license, or I believe they call it CS points. And you may be familiar with that. It's a system that they track of how many points are a strike against you, and it can work against you over time if you keep violating these DOT rules. So these are weigh stations. They're weigh in motion. There are ones you have to actually pull up on. In my experience as a truck driver, it's always best to just weigh the load. Now, if you're under 30,000 pounds, most of the time you don't have to weigh. But if you want peace of mind, and maybe they didn't load the merchandise right, go to a CAT scale, go to a certified scale, and get that negative thought off your mind and have a more peaceful drive. But experienced truck drivers know this, that if they're under a certain amount in the box, usually you don't have to weigh, and that's mostly the case. So, but if you're over, let's say 35 or 40,000, it's a very good idea to weigh, to avoid these violations and these tickets. Now, there are systems out there that companies have which can allow you to bypass the weigh station, and it just depends what system your company is using, and it will give you a signal on your tablet or even on your transponder, a device that is attached to the windshield, where it will give you a green light or a red light, and of course red indicating that you must pull in. And the company, if they have a good record or a good score with DOT, it eliminates you going into the weigh station a lot of times. And if you as a truck driver are diligent and you obey the rules, that creates a good record for the company. It creates a good record for you, and it's a more efficient flow moving forward, getting the miles that you need on the road. So yes, there are systems or bypass systems that will assist you in bypassing these weigh stations, saving you time. You don't always get the green light. Sometimes the bypass will tell you to pull in, and you have to, of course, obey that bypass, because there could be a highway patrol waiting for you, or they can see that you went through and you can get a big ticket. Now, we all know that sometimes as truck drivers, we accidentally miss a station because you don't know whether it's open, and sometimes there's not proper lighting. And that's another thing to look out for as a truck driver, and especially as a new truck driver. Weigh stations are important. It's good to get familiar with them. There's over 1,000 of them located around the United States. A truck driver must be aware of them, must know how they work. And just with time, truck driving over the road and just putting in your time, you get to see patterns and you become more familiar of how things work out here. It's always good to do best practices while you're driving, because it's just going to save you a lot of pain and a lot of time loss out on the road, and it will allow you to keep getting the miles that you need and moving forward in an efficient way. I hope this video was helpful. If you like content like this, trucking content like this, share this video with someone that you think can benefit from it, and also consider subscribing to Survivors Truck Talk. We obviously love talking about trucking, everything related to the trucking industry, and I hope that you are gaining value from these videos that we are putting out.